Die agus fáilte dí rula bula. I am once again prepping for Art Fight and talking about my OCs, but since the last video the themes have been announced and Art Fight is starting on Tuesday. The theme is Fossil versus Crystal. I mentioned last video that this theme was definitely not my first choice, so I kinda just picked Fossil because I like dinosaurs, and also because I have a friend on Crystal. They boosted the friendly fire point reduction this year, so I wouldn't have been opposed to Crystal, but I was asked very nicely, and how could I refuse? I've changed and updated my profile a lot since last year, but I'm still adding some final touches that are more themed around fossils this year. But this is what I have so far. I'm currently working on my card and I'm struggling to pick which of my OCs to highlight, but I'll probably have it figured out by the time Art Fight is live. I've also begun properly prepping videos for July. I just hope my plan works out for me, because editing is a whole lot of work and there's a lot to edit. Anywho, onto the blurbo of this video. This is Small Fry. No, that's not her actual name, but I'm also not going to tell you what it is. It's one of my many author secrets for now, but it also means that I won't be covering her name in this video and what it means. She got that nickname when she was a kid on account of her being tiny, even by Umbran standards, standing at a proud 3'2". Oh, but what's an Umbran, you ask? Good question. In my modern fantasy world Pathera, they don't have traditional fantasy dwarves, they have Umbran, which are a slightly more realistic look at what cave people might evolve into given enough time. They're a kind of elf, of which there are 3 in Pathera, and they split off from the line quite some time ago. Umbran are usually extremely pale with little to no pigment in their skin or hair. They have large round eyes adapted to suit the low light of their cave systems and very sensitive ears that can hear a mouse's heartbeat from miles away. Their body hair is thin and soft, and their head typically doesn't grow hair very long, if it does grow it at all. They get facial hair regardless of gender, which is whisker-like and very sensitive. Many Umbran have some kind of magic, though this is primarily due to their diet and less to do with having any kind of high population of sorcerers. They also have bioluminescence thanks to their diet, which tends to manifest in thinner patches of skin and areas with higher blood flow like the cheeks and nose. The unfortunate fact is that while there aren't many Umbran living on the surface, most of them will eventually lose access to these 2 factors thanks to their normal diet being more difficult to acquire. This is especially bad because they use bioluminescence along with their tail to communicate. Thankfully, even though Small Fry has recently moved to the surface, she wasn't cut off from her normal diet. She's currently attending college in Villia to become an archivist. Villia is one of the more accommodating countries, and she has a fair few things that need accommodating, even excluding her diet. Being on the surface is such a different environment than she's used to and is kind of a sensory nightmare for her. She has to wear earplugs and sometimes even mufflers on top of them, and has to protect her eyes with custom blackout goggles that let a very limited amount of light in. She had wanted to attend her classes at night, but there weren't any teachers available, leaving her stuck to her classes in the bright light of day where everyone is out and about. That, along with her cultural differences, has made her feel very lonely and isolated from her classmates. The loneliness starts to take a turn for the better once her teacher starts introducing everyone to computers. She is a natural at them, and her popularity skyrockets when everyone else finds out. People are always coming to her for advice, and she really starts to take it personally. Slowly, her free time gets taken over by fiddling around with her computer, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and how she can show up the next day to impress everyone all over again. Over time, she figures out how to hack into other computers. She's hesitant at first, but curiosity eats at her until she gives in. There frankly isn't a whole lot to see at first. Computers are still new and too many people are still figuring out how they work for her to find anything right off the bat. She's about to give up looking through other people's stuff. The moral dilemma is weighing on her so greatly until she discovers a strange file in the school's system. It was locked behind a password, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't seem to guess it. She checked it every day, seeing if it would change or disappear, but it lingered, the file size occasionally increasing. She had to figure out what it was, and developed the first password cracking program over the course of a few weeks just to know. Finally, she was in. Everything was written in Old Draconic, a language that many who grew up in Villia would know but was gibberish to Small Fry. She saved the file externally and left to find a translation book. It took her most of the day to translate, and while it was rough, she was able to understand enough to realise what it was that she'd stumbled across. It was the plans for a coup. She recognised the names of several countries, but none of the names of the people involved. If she had to guess, they were probably code names. Paranoia creeped into her, causing her to leave the drive behind as she ran out of her apartment. She wandered the city streets, second-guessing every person that passed her by, revisiting every interaction she's had since she moved here. She continued walking for hours, refusing to rest for even a second, even when her legs began to ache and her head began to throb. It was dark out now, and the number of people out and about had significantly dwindled. She was able to finally find somewhere where she could think, and she realised, to her horror, that she'd left the drive behind. She was hesitant to return to her apartment, but figured that if she was going to tell someone, she would have to have the proof in that drive. On her way back, she turned a corner and bumped into one of her classmates. They talked a few times before, briefly, but her classmate, Nerida, she was pretty sure she was called, had always seemed pretty uncomfortable when they were together, and Small Fry got the feeling that she didn't like her very much. Nerida seemed startled, and Small Fry was able to discern by the smell alone that she was definitely tipsy. She was about to continue walking, the paranoia yelling at her to get back to the apartment as soon as possible and avoid people altogether. I mean, you never know who could be part of this. When Nerida spoke up, she started rambling about some crush and how she's been struggling so hard to confess, but all Small Fry could think about was how this was delaying her getting the drive. When Nerida finally went quiet, Small Fry was about to excuse herself. Before she could get a word out, she saw a figure appear behind her classmate, and fear held her in a tight grasp. She let out a sharp gasp, and before she could do anything, Nerida was out cold. Small Fry turned to run, but the moment she moved, her mind went blank and the world faded into darkness. They're both fine, but unfortunately, they have been kidnapped and are now wrapped up in this whole coup plot. I won't say any more in the story, at least for now, partially because spoilers and partially because the story and all my ideas are still fresh, so things are likely to change. Speaking of the story, it's worth clarifying that Small Fry is actually part of the same story as Nerida, that Mero from my mermaid video, and just like Nerida, she was reworked from the same older story. In this older story, she was originally just a really short high schooler, and then she became an alien in disguise or something. I'm not sure, because as mentioned in the mermaid video, the details were all really vague. When I started thinking about how I could rework everything, I figured it would be cooler to make her an Umbran, since most of the Umbran characters I have are relegated to the background or to stories that take place entirely isolated from the rest of the world. This, of course, called for some pretty significant changes to her design. I had to follow the species rules I'd laid out, so I changed her initially to fit those and then altered it slightly to match her new character. She has two main outfits. One looks a bit more fashionable, but to Small Fry is approximately zero effort. The other is more like workwear, which she likes to wear when she is getting into the more practical stuff over theory stuff in class. And yes, she does wear Crocs. If it were up to her, she'd probably be barefoot, all things considered. It's just not as viable than Vilya. For her personality, she was so one-dimensional originally that I basically just had to give her an entirely new character. She was just kind of a tsundere, which also sort of centered her character around Destiny, Nerida's previous self of sorts. I didn't like that. I wanted her to be more three-dimensional, separate from the whole love story stuff as well. She's still snarky and a bit rude, but most of it comes from bluntness and an unwillingness to lie rather than an actual mean spirit. I also swapped the roles between her and Nerida. She was originally the one with the crush, but with the changes I made to both their characters, I felt it was more fitting for Nerida to have the crush. There isn't a whole lot to talk about the original character, but now she's a very creative person who really likes to work with her hands. She's a very fast thinker, but not always right with her conclusions, and doesn't care much for her appearance beyond really liking her hair being as long as it is. She's got a lot of split ends though from lack of proper hair care. She's protective over the things she loves, but has a bad habit of folding to meet expectations. Moving to Vilya to become an archivist was her first attempt at doing something truly for herself, without anyone else's input. She's never really felt like she belongs anywhere she went, and has this little fantasy about impressing everyone so much with her amazing skills and sharp thinking that she's just immediately accepted into a group. I have some extra time now, so I shall now give that brief description of Vilea that I wrote for the mermaid video that I tragically had no time for back then. The holy state of Vilea, for a visual, is like if you combined the modern Vatican City with ancient Greece and then put it in a 70s fantasy setting, which also was trying to accommodate for all the different races that live there. The result is something a little uncanny. The entire country is kind of centred around its capital, Willem, which is also the religious and educational centre of the country. It was built around the ancient mountain that they consider their god. The mountain looks distinctly like a dragon bowing its head and reaching its hands up to the sky, extending beyond the clouds. A waterfall and river also flow from this, and it's said to grant the drinker the answer to their most pressing question. By the name and what I just talked about, it isn't hard to discern that Vilea is a rather religious place. Their religion mainly revolves around their quest to understand everything possible, and it's said that once a person is able to learn everything possible and able to answer any question given correctly, then their god will awaken and allow that person to ascend beyond the sky. They are then given the opportunity to create their own world and start the cycle anew. Vilea is divided into two main sects, which are split in the idea of sharing all the information they've spent so long compiling. In order to satisfy both sides, their largest archive, the Great Well, is limited in who can go in, and a sort of chosen one is selected every couple of generations, tasked with the mission of learning everything that they have in their archives and then some. Libraries and the role of librarian were created, not just in Vilea but across the world, as a way to share information with the masses and encourage learning. Vilean librarians are often treated globally with the same respect that one would offer a healer, and they have been instrumental in the globalization and distribution of information to more cut-off communities. Their job has also recently been given a huge help in the invention and more common use of computers. Vilea figured out how to use them to create a global network of information that they upload from their archives, which allows for easier access to information stored in a book on the other side of the world. In Vilea, there are 4 key roles a person can play in the religion. Students, whose job it is to learn and ask questions. Teachers, whose job it is to impart knowledge onto others in the most suitable way possible. Librarians, I just explained, but is centered around giving access to knowledge and encouraging independent learning in others. And archivists, whose job it is to acquire and protect knowledge. So with that, there's not much time left in the video. I had planned to do that Artfied guide video, but things just didn't pan out. Tragically, life got in the way. I have one more prep video planned to go up next week, and from then on it'll mostly be quote-unquote filler until Artfied ends. Once that happens, I'll talk about how it went. Remember folks to save all the character references for the characters you want to draw first externally, because the site is notorious for crashing in the first few days. Slán go fóill!